Well, I want to say good morning to each of you this morning. It is great to welcome you here, and personally I would like to say thank you as well for the cards you just gave to everybody. That's a very kind thing for you to do, and also to thank you for the cards that you've sent individually as well. Some of you have done that, and that's awfully kind, and we really appreciate that, and it means a lot to hear from you in that way. It is a beautiful day. I feel like I've already been to church, and that was just on my drive here. It's just a phenomenal worship sanctuary that God has done for us, and He paints for us once every year. And if you think about that, if you're blessed to live to 80, let's say, you get 80 fall days, or 80 fall seasons, I should say it that way, 80 autumns. And so be sure to take the time to cherish them. And of course, when you're a little baby, you don't really notice that much. So it's even less than that, actually, that you really notice and appreciate. So just take the time. It would cost millions and billions of dollars for mankind to create what God just naturally does every season. And so He just does a wonderful job. And I hope that you can worship in the sanctuary of nature, and that you can enjoy His presence in places like that. And I think that also it's going to increase your joy. It's not unrelated to what we've been talking about. In fact, here it will be several Sundays down the road, but in Philippians we read about, think about everything that's beautiful and good and lovely and all those things. It promotes joy when you think about beauty, and when you appreciate beauty, it promotes joy in your life. And that's a wonderful thing. And so I just would encourage you to do that, to think about beautiful things, good things. What was it Kim Martin used to say? Fun things. Fun things. Right. And it's fun things when we look at what God has made and get to enjoy some of those things together. We've been talking in this series out of the book of Philippians. If you're totally new to the Bible, that's okay. And if you'd like to get caught up, feel free, stonestill.org. You can hop out there and you can listen to these podcasts, or go to the YouTube channel and watch some of the previous messages that we've done here on the book of Philippians. And the book of Philippians was a letter that Paul wrote. It's kind of an acknowledgement letter, a progress report kind of letter that he wrote to a group of people in the city of Philippi. He's in a Roman jail cell, or house arrest, I should say. He's under house arrest in Rome. We'll be talking about that a little bit today. And there he's having a valuable ministry. But it's also the place where Paul was able to write a bunch of letters, not just the one to the Philippian believers, but a bunch of letters. They're known as the prison epistles. And what's crazy is that Paul does some of his best stuff while he's incarcerated in the very unideal situation or circumstance. And that's crazy. It's almost as if God has to incarcerate this guy to slow him down enough so he could write. He just was going nonstop. And so I think that God just kind of permits this to happen. I've been talking to you so out of his life and out of some of the things that he's written here in Philippians, and we'll continue to do that. But I want you to pay close attention to what the man says, how he says it, and let that be a sermon in and of itself, because it gives you insight on how to have more joy in your life. Sometimes people want happiness. They want to be joyful. And what life has taught me and has taught so many others, if you make joy and happiness the goal of your life, it'll always be like sand that slips through your fingers. You'll never find it. But if you find true life purpose, a true servant leadership oriented reason to be alive, when you find that and you give yourself self-sacrificially to it, that kind of thing is the thing where you're going along one day and then happiness and joy just kind of sneak in the back door, because you've given yourself to something meaningful, something valuable. And that's what was going on in Paul's life. Even though his circumstances weren't the best of circumstances, he had given himself to the right life purpose, and it's made a huge difference in his life. I talked to you about how to be a better teammate. That was last week, and we've talked to you about some other things as well. in this series related to relationships and joy. And today, I want us to begin another section of the first chapter of the book of Philippians. And the Bible, the content is broken up into chapters and verse numbers. It wasn't always that way, but it's just easier to reference. So if you're new to the Bible, it's the book of Philippians in the New Testament. It's chapter 1, and then there's verses along with that. So we're going to do verses 12 through 26. And I won't get through all that today, but that's the section that we're working on. So if you'd like to read it in a Bible that you have, or if you need a Bible, let me know, and feel free. And work through it with me, and then I'll unpack it a little bit at a time so we just clearly understand this. All right? And hopefully in all of it, it's not just an exercise in learning here. It is that your joy might be complete, that your joy might be greater, and your relationships better, and your partnerships more vivid and alive, and that your journey through life is more fulfilling because you've understood a different and a better perspective. I had someone not long ago give me these. Isn't that neat? It's just like, I think it's just see life through a different lens. And it's just advertising like a transition, signature, adaptive lens kind of thing for a magazine. But I like that. See, what we're doing, actually I can kind of see you better. Go figure. Maybe just cutting out all the spotlight. But what we want to do in this series is give you something you can slide across your vision or perspective so that you can start seeing life differently. And I admit, guys, maintaining a right perspective has been really hard for me in my life. It has been. And so I really appreciate Philippians like this because, I can get negative sometimes too with the best of them, right? And I can see bad things rather than good things. And I think we all can. So this is like a lifelong journey for me. And so I really personally appreciate this book because it's helping me to see it differently as well as you. So each week, I'm excited. Monday morning, man, I'm tearing into this stuff because I love this because it's giving me a better way to do life. And I get the privilege of sharing it with you each week. And so what a great opportunity that is. So what we're wanting to do here is we're going to slide something new, something different in front of you so that you can see life through a different lens. And it reminds me of a story that I heard, and it's about a letter that a college student wrote to her parents back when letters were about the only long-distance communication method that you could have with someone. So if you wanted to communicate with your kid at college, you wrote a letter because there was just no other way to do that. And it was back in those days, and I love this because this new college student, this daughter that's gone off to a school that's some distance away, it shows perspective, and it shows how perspective influences our reactions. Listen to this. She says, "Dear Mom and Dad, I'm sorry to be so long in writing. Unfortunately, all my stationery was destroyed the night our dorm was set on fire by the demonstrators. I'm out of the hospital now, and the doctors say my eyesight should return sooner or later. The wonderful boy, Bill, who rescued me from the fire, kindly offered to share his little apartment with me until the dorm is rebuilt. He comes from a good family, so you won't be surprised when I tell you we're going to be married. In fact, since you've always wanted a grandchild, you'll be glad to know that you'll be grandparents next month. Signed, your daughter." And then she writes P.S. Postscript. P.S. Please disregard the above practice in English composition. There was no fire. I haven't been in the hospital. I'm not pregnant. And I don't even have a steady boyfriend. But I did get a D in French and an F in chemistry, and I just wanted to be sure you received this news in the proper perspective. Amen? Yes. Now that is a smart college freshman, isn't it? Absolutely. She created an experience for those parents that gave to them a proper perspective, even though some negative stuff had been happening in her life. I like it. Well, when we think about that, and we think about where we are in this book of Philippians, we understand that when we see this next block of material in this book, it gives to us some very fresh, new perspectives that if we will choose, emphasis on choose, a different perspective, even all of these 4 perspectives that he's going to offer. Slide 9, if you would, for me, slide 9. As we look at these, they're going to gradually increase our joy. As we look at these and live these out, they will lift our joy. They will position us to have better relationships. And they go something like this: 4 mature perspectives that increases joy in a very depressing and dark, and what can be a very depressing and dark time. Adversity means advance. Adversity means advance. When you see life from a mature perspective, adversity is not the tell-all. It's not the defining things in life, negative things in life that define us, or those things that happen that define us. Instead, we begin to see adversity differently than we've ever seen it before. Controversy, or if you're from a British person, controversy. Controversy causes rejoicing. Controversy causes rejoicing. When you see Paul's reasons for being able to rejoice, even though he was surrounded by people who were creating controversy for him, yes, even while he was incarcerated, at one of his low points in life, he had his detractors, he had his critics, but he learned to deal with criticism in a very positive way. And you're going to see this as we work our way through this next block of material. Okay, verses 12 through 26, Philippians 1. All right, testing produces triumph. It can be good when we're tested. We kind of know who we are when we're tested. We kind of have a better feel of our identity when we're tested. We can draw together and get closer with others when we're tested. And it's not just us a hot shot doing life alone, okay? Because we can't do life alone. And so testing produces triumph, and that's a mature perspective we all need. And if we'll live that way, our joy is going to rise, okay? Absence yields presence. Paul didn't have to survive. If he lived, it was Christ. If he died, it was Christ. And that made all the difference in the world in how he could live his life with joy. You see, it's not hard. It's not rocket science here, or some complicated equation for why some people are happy and others are not, why some people have joy and others don't seem to have much joy. It's not that complicated. It's a decision that is made in our hearts when we're going to see life in a different viewpoint, in a different way, and we're going to choose to rejoice. Paul says this verbatim. He chooses to rejoice despite his critics, despite the testing, despite the absence from people that he loved, despite the adversity in his life. He says, I'm choosing joy. I'm going to choose to savor the present moment. If it's a red leaf or an orange leaf or a yellow leaf or brown, I'm going to enjoy just this moment, just this day, right now. And thank you, God, for the joy and the friends I have to enjoy it with. All right? So we're looking at these. Now, we're not going to get through all of these today. So you're going to have to come back to see the full deal here and to experience it. But we'll definitely get one of them covered, at least, maybe a couple of them. But Paul is a great example of giving us these mature perspectives that increase joy. Now let me set it up for especially those who don't maybe have a Bible background and they don't really know what's happening here, to kind of get the backstory. Preceding Paul's arrival in Rome, he's been in custody for 2 years. And that's been a 2-year process from the time he appealed to Caesar to the time he actually arrived in Rome. And then once he gets in Rome, he's incarcerated under house arrest for another 2 years. Just trust me on it. I've kind of done the chronological work on his life. Okay? So 2 years in the journey, 2 years in Rome under house arrest, chained to a Praetorian Roman guard. And on the way to Rome, he was shipwrecked. He was snake bitten. And when he finally arrived at Rome, a lot of his privacy was taken away. And I know we all need privacy and things. And when we don't have privacy, we definitely can get cranky, definitely lose some of our joy. Well, Paul had to learn to live with these inconveniences. And he's got a lot of inconveniences in his life, in fact. And what's crazy is that, see, Paul had a dream. He had a dream of proclaiming the gospel to all of Rome. Rome was like the strategic center of the world. What's the cliche? All roads lead to Rome. They had built these highways and things, and so they were just the mover and shaker of the first century world. They were the superpower. And Paul's vision was to go there, and perhaps he had these grandiose dreams of standing in the center of a Colosseum where the gladiatorial games unfolded, and instead of seeing someone lose their life, maybe he had this vision of standing there proclaiming the gospel to Roman and Jew and Greek and Gentile and any other stripe or brand in between. He had this great vision of proclaiming this great announcement, euangelion, the gospel, which is an announcement of a state of affairs have changed. And he had this great vision of standing there and proclaiming, maybe to thousands, this wonderful, wonderful message that was just taking the first century Mediterranean world by storm. That was what he wanted to do. And God and Paul have a conversation. Paul, you indeed are going to go to Rome, but you're going to go as a royal prisoner. Really? Yeah. You're going to accomplish the vision I got for you. But I've got a little different method for you getting there. And so Paul's like, I get to do what I've always wanted to do, but it's not really in a way that I have it planned. And yet he's the same guy that writes about joy. Now what about you? Have you had these great, grandiose plans of how you wanted your life to go? You had this great vision, this great picture that if you could just be in the center of this particular area of life or this world, maybe in your vocation or maybe in a life stage, you had this great idea of how life was going to go, and it didn't happen that way, and you've kind of been struggling against that. And you've been chafing against the way that life has gone and the way that your dream has been fleshed out. It's almost as if Paul could have had a when and then perspective like you and I have today. When this happens, then I'll be joyful. And that's how the cliche goes, or the formula goes. When I get in college, when I save this much money, then I'll be joyful. When I have a baby, then I'll have joy. Or maybe you're at the life stage, when my babies leave home, I'll have joy. Maybe when I get to live there, then I'll have joy. Or when I no longer have to deal with these people, then I'll have joy. I'll be happy. And you see, that is an immature perspective that robs you of today, especially today's joy. It's not a perspective you want to go with. It wouldn't fit on this mature perspective list this morning. Because when this happens, then this happens. It makes it all conditional, and it's conditional based on what I think I really want in life. And how many of us really know what we want in life until we actually live it? Right? We have to live it. And we have to understand that there's some adversity in life, there's some testing, there's some things that happen. We've got to work through, and it's all part of the plan to make us what God wants us to be. And so, if it's not a when this happens, then this happens, maybe it's the old immature formula of what if. What if? The what if perspective can rob us of joy. What if I would have married them? Or what if I would have taken that job instead? Or what if I had said no instead of yes? And friends, there's rarely ever any joy in the what if formula of life. Rarely ever. Rarely ever do we have when this, then this formula that works to promote your joy. No, there's a better way here. And so what I see here in Paul and what I see in our lives, your life and my life, is that we have to make a decision to adopt a different perspective on life. We are going to see life differently. And I'm going to ask that question, and really that's what I'm arguing for this morning, is how are you going to view and interpret what happens to you in your life? That's bottom line. That's this question in a propositional sermonic statement nutshell. How are you going to view and interpret what happens to you in your life? That is a decision. How do you get outside of yourself and see things from a different and better perspective? Well, here's how Paul did it. He made a decision that everything in my life is going to lift up Jesus in some way. That's what I'm living for. And it's going to modify Him. Every verb and adverb and adjective of my life is going to modify the key subject of it. And that's Jesus. And in verses 12 through 26, you actually have the name Christ appear several times. In fact, it's when we read through it in a second, I've got the word Christ. I've got the word Christ in yellow. Actually, it was in red. You couldn't see it. And the guys did me a favor and changed it to yellow so you can pop it out a little more. But you're going to see the name Christ show up in this. And this is the bottom line thing that we have to consider if we're going to adopt a better perspective, a more mature perspective. I want everything in my life to amplify Him in some way. So if I get a flat tire, how can Jesus be lifted up? If I have to go from one responsibility that I like to a responsibility I don't like, how can Jesus be lifted up? If I get the win or if I get the loss, how can Jesus be lifted up? If this happens to me, or if someone's very inconsiderate and creates headache for me, how can Jesus be lifted up? How can I lift up the Lord in all of it? If my marriage isn't going great, well, how can Christ be represented in this? You see? So everything in my life is going to lift up Jesus in some way. And that's the fresh, new, mature perspective that I would offer to you this morning. How can I use this situation, this relationship, this unfortunate event to promote the Lord, or at least to serve someone in His name? How can I do it? You see how life takes on so much more adventure and so much more excitement and joy when you choose to live life and see life this way? It's phenomenal what God can do with that and what can happen. What deeper resources of strength can I draw on right now that will enable me to see the big picture? And if you have a Christ-centered perspective in life, it will keep you going in all the pain and the disappointment and the surgeries and the letdowns and what you see as betrayals. It will keep you dead center. If you know who you are and what your mission in life is and what's important to you, the negative things in life will never be able to define you, especially when you're in situations as inconvenient as an incarcerated Paul in a Roman house arrest situation. A guy that always had to be on the go, now he's stuck. And yet, he's got a perspective that buoys him above this, and that it's going to see him through. That's the thing I love about the Louis Zamperini story. I've used him as an illustration. From the time he landed, I think it was in the Pacific, the time he landed in the Pacific and survived on a life raft for 40-some odd days, he had one buddy, he could have made it. The one guy wasn't hurt. He could have made it. There's 3 guys, 2 of them survived, 1 didn't. And the third, the guy that didn't survive, he could have made it. Physically, he could have made it. But his attitude, his perspective, Zamperini said at one point he just had to reach over and smack the guy because he was going nuts in the raft. He just didn't have a perspective, a mindset, and he was going to jeopardize their lives. And so he lost perspective. And that's the thing that made Zamperini so resilient. He was able to somehow grab a hold of a perspective despite his very unideal circumstances. And that's what Paul is putting forth to all of us today. All right, now let's do this. Let's read through this, because I'm not so sure that maybe you're able to read through this at home and maybe you're not. But let's just read through the verses. It'll go pretty quickly here. And then we'll look at this first. Adversity means advanced, mature perspective. Okay? Let's just read through this. Now I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. As a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. I am in chains for Christ. Notice the word Christ. And because of my chains, most of the brothers and sisters have become confident in the Lord and dare all the more to proclaim or to even casually converse about the gospel without fear. Verse 15. It is true that some preach Christ, there it is again, out of envy and rivalry, but others out of goodwill. The latter do so out of love, knowing that I am put here for the defense of the gospel. The former preach Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely supposing that they can stir up trouble for me while I'm in my chains. Have you ever been there before? Okay, Paul, you wanted to stand in the Colosseum. You wanted to freely proclaim the gospel. You're in jail. You're chained. You can't go. But look at us. Doo-doo-doo. You know, we're out here. We're having fun. We're sharing the gospel. We're getting our little crusades. We're just having a blast with very little imposition or obstacles or speed bumps to deal with. We're having fun. I hope you get the message, Paul. We don't really like you anyway, but, you know, here you go. Right? So Paul's dealing with this. We'll talk about that a little more. The former preach Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely, supposing that they can stir up trouble for me while I'm in my chains. All right? Verse 18. Look at this mature perspective. Hey, try this one on for size. It works. Listen, but what does it matter? What does it matter? The important thing is that in every way, whether from false motives or true, Christ is preached. I love this guy. I'd like to hang with this guy. I'd like to watch some football and eat carameled apples with this guy. Right? This is the kind of guy that's going to, you know what? I need a little bit of that. Whatever that guy's got, I need some. All right? Let's bottle it and sell it, because who in the world do you have in your network of friendships that looks at life this way? Well, it's few and far between sometimes. But this guy is like, you know what? Let him attack me personally. I'm going to rejoice. Yes, I will continue to rejoice. It's not about me. I gave that to the Lord a long time ago, he says. It's about the Lord. And I don't have a fundamental problem with their message. They're proclaiming a good message. Now in Galatia, Church of the Galatians, he had a problem with the message. In this case, he has no problem with the message. It's a right message. I'm okay. The Lord's going to see me through this. I'm going to rejoice even though I got critics. Listen, for I know that through your prayers and God's provision of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, I got my Philippian brothers and sisters praying for me. Jesus is with me. I feel His presence. There it is, Jesus Christ again. What has happened to me will turn out for my deliverance. Verse 20. On the screen, okay? I eagerly expect and hope that I will in no way be ashamed, but will have sufficient courage, so that now as always Christ will be exalted in my body, whether by life or by death. For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. If I am to go on living in the body, this will mean fruitful labor for me. Yet what shall I choose? I do not know. Verse 23 says, I am torn between the two. I desire to depart and be with Christ, which is better by far, but it is more necessary for you that I remain in the body. Okay? So if we leave the body, we're spirit and body. If spirit leaves the body, it goes to be with Christ. All right? So don't worry about soul sleep and other things. When you leave your body, your spirit leaves your body, you're with Christ. So you can be assured of that. And Paul says it's better by far, but it's more necessary for you that I remain in the body. Convinced of this, I know that I will remain. I have this sense that I'm going to remain, and in fact he does. He gets released. He later is reincarcerated, and Nero takes his life with a sword about 64 AD, 65 AD, somewhere right around in there. So he was released, he was reincarcerated, and so he says, I will remain, and I will continue with all of you for now, for your progress and joy in the faith. Verse 26, so that through my being with you again, your boasting in Christ Jesus will abound on account of me. Isn't that awesome? So this guy, Paul, gives us these incredible perspectives on life. Now, I've shared them with you, so let's revisit. Go back to our perspective slide. Just back to real quickly. There we go. So what are we looking at right now? Okay? What we're looking at right now is the first of these 4 mature perspectives that are going to increase your joy. And the first one is adversity means advance. Adversity means advance. Go to slide 2 if you would. Slide 2, this is Philippians 1:12. He says, I want you to know, Paul says. And when he uses a phrase like that, he is always correcting a misunderstanding. Something had been circulating about the reasons for his incarceration, how that was going, what was up with it, the controversy surrounding it. And so Paul says, thank you for your gifts. God's going to complete in you what you've completed for me and by way of an offering, Philippians 1:5. Now I'm going to get into a progress report of this letter. I'm going to tell you what's going on. I'm going to explain things because I know you got questions. You Philippians are pimp. You're awesome. You're my source of joy and strength, and I pray for you all the time. Now let me offer some explanations because I know you have questions. And so he says, I want you to know. I'm correcting something that maybe you're of an opinion that maybe isn't quite right. But I want you to know, brothers and sisters, I love the familiar terms, that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. Paul corrects their thinking here. He says, listen, I'm not in retreat here in Rome. He's saying, all these things that have happened to me have resulted in a clearing the way so that the gospel might be preached more effectively. And so as a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. And so Paul is chained day and night to a Roman soldier. He was a prisoner of Caesar, and as such, he was under the care of the picked palace and praetorian guard. Pull up slide 11 for me. This is the kind of guy he was chained to. That's kind of a similar attire that he probably had on. These guys, and Paul was like, his perspective was not that, I don't get to preach in a Colosseum filled with thousands of people. I'm so sad about that. No, that wasn't what he focused on. His focus was, you know what? The gospel is being proclaimed in a way I never thought it would be. In fact, I get the pick of the Roman Praetorian Guard, the pick of the litter. I mean, the very best guys. These are the guys that got double pay and special privileges. They even became so powerful that their choice for emperor was always honored. Okay? And so there were like 10,000 of these guys. They were of Italian birth. The guard was the official bodyguard of the emperor, and they took charge of all the imperial prisoners. And Paul had the wonderful opportunity of being able to talk to these guys one-on-one, day in and day out, around the clock, about the gospel. And he's like, guys, you Philippians, let me tell you what God is doing. And what's crazy is that we read a little later in Philippians 4:22, he says, all God's people here send you greetings. Listen now, especially those who belong to Caesar's household. Guys, don't feel too bad for me. God and the gospel and Jesus Christ are making inroads into the imperial guard of Rome. These guys that are hobnobbing with Nero from time to time, Caesar Nero and his family, they're all hearing this incredible announcement of good news that I have to make around the world, and God is doing it in a way I never thought He would. And just think about this. I mean, these guys, they change shifts every 4 to 6 hours. So every 4 to 6 hours, they would be chained to Paul's wrist would be chained to a guard. And they would be in charge of him for that period of time. He was an imperial prisoner of Rome. And think about that. I know that would be really hard for me. Think about the loss of privacy. I mean, there goes my joy right there. If I'm chained to somebody every minute of every day, I'm really struggling with joy and perspective. Wouldn't you be? Think about that. I mean, what would happen? I don't want to sound undignified, but what would happen if you had to go number 1? And you got this guy's, and God forbid, number 2. What would you do? Your privacy is gone. And for whatever reason, that would be really hard for me. I don't know how a guy like Paul would sustain such a positive attitude and to sustain his joy and perspective like he does in this way. And another thing is they're all Italians. All right? What if they had garlic breath? Think about that. You know, I worked with a guy one time, no kidding, he loved garlic. He would eat garlic. He would take garlic pills. I mean, read something where garlic's good for you. It probably is. But he just took way too much of it. And when he would sweat, I kid you not, when he would sweat, the garlic would just kind of, the smell would just ooze out of his pores. And I had to work with a guy in a closed kiosk. Okay, so I learned, you know, this could be a tough thing. So we have to get through this, right? Well, this is Paul. This is where his privacy is gone. He's chained. He's got garlic breath all around him. All right, with very little ventilation. How in the world, little things like that, how in the world is he going to have joy? How can he write a letter like this? Well, he got past that. He got past all of it. And how did he get past it? Well, I think we see it right here. He lived for something much bigger and much better and much greater than just pursuing convenience. I'm not going to be happy if I don't have the most comfortable chair. I'm not going to be happy unless I have the best meals. I'm not going to be happy unless I drive the nicest or live in this or if I got that job. I'm just not going to have joy until that happens. When this, then this. That's not the way Paul saw life. You see, Paul had Christ as the center of his life. That was his life purpose. And he had a perspective that says, you know, I'm going to make sure that I ask myself the question every day I live, every minute I live, how can I lift up Jesus in all of this? I want to ask you a question this morning. Do you have some adversity in your life? What if, there is a what if, right? What if you start seeing the positive benefits of negative experiences? Do you think your joy could increase? Do you think it would be better to be around you as in relationships and friendships? When we look for the positive, friends, it breeds resilience. You can bounce back from adversity because, and you hang out with people that look at life this way. You know, and I think about, you know, who was really incarcerated? Was it Paul or was it the Roman guard? I mean, who are you feeling sorry for? Well, when you get done reading Paul and what was going on with him in his life, I don't know that I'm feeling too sorry for Paul. It's the Roman guards that's chained to this guy 4 to 6 hours at a hitch, and they're getting firsthand one-on-one tutoring in the gospel by this great guy who had a very positive outlook on life. You know, last week I mentioned I'm a cheerleader and a coach, and I really am. And I love you, but I'm going to challenge you to up your game, as I always will. And the way I'm challenging you today is that to ask yourself that question and to adopt a more mature perspective, one of these other mature perspectives in life that maybe you haven't been able to grab a hold of. But as a coach, you know, I think to convince you that one of these perspectives can impact your life for good. Now, I told you last week I've been trying to do this with a group of guys that are in my small group. If you go to slide 14 for me, I think the first devotional I gave these guys was football and God, and I talked about Tim Tebow and how he puts Philippians 4:13 under in the eye black that he wears. He'll put maybe a Bible verse in there, and Philippians 4:13. We've heard it before. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I talked to them the next week about football and family. You know, talked about Cole Pittman and his story. It was a University of Texas linebacker, and he died in a car wreck. And he was number 44. It was several years ago, number 44, and his mom and dad had to fight through the adversity of that. It was gut-wrenching to fight through that. They loved their son. In fact, that's the only, I only remember reading this in this particular book. Him and his dad, even when he was in college, Cole Pittman, big linebacker for Texas Longhorns, okay? Big guy, strong guy. Him and his dad would hold hands in the truck while they went places. Like, wow. I love that. It's awesome. And so I talked to the guys in my small group about football and family. I talked to them about football and country. I talked about Pat Tillman. And Pat Tillman is the safety for the Arizona Cardinals. And after September 11, 2001 happened, he walked away from millions in NFL football. He enlisted in the Army. He got his Ranger tab, promptly went to Afghanistan, and he lost his life due to friendly fire. So I talked a little bit about that, God and country, and football and country. And football and education, I told the story of Michael Oher, who is the blind side guy. Maybe you've seen that movie. He was the blind side guy. In other words, most quarterbacks are right-handed, and the left tackle on the offensive line is critical because he's got to protect the blind side. You want to stud on that side because, that's your life right there. I talked a little bit about that, and talked a little bit about football and education, football and fans. The Vince Papale story, you know about this guy. Invincible was the name of the movie about his life. He's a 30-year-old guy that decided to try out open tryouts back when Dick Vermeil had those. And he actually made the team, and he became one of the favorites of the fans because of the adversity he had to overcome, age and other things he had to overcome in order to make this team, and to put up with the monotony of the daily grind of professional football. And all the fans really loved him because he was kind of one of them that had to put on a jersey to compete. But I just bring you back, slide number 13, I bring you back to the blind side story because it's a very intriguing story about overcoming adversity. And sometimes we're just going to have to overcome some things through Christ and His strength. And what this story was about, this guy, Michael Oher, was basically living on the streets in Memphis, Tennessee. He was flunking out of school. His family was broken. He was doing nothing with his life, but he was huge. He was athletic. And a family kind of befriends him, the Leanne and Sean Toohey family. They take him in. They hire a tutor to help him in school because he's been flunking out year after year after year. And by the time he gets into the Toohey family's household, they have him in a private school. Of course, they encourage him to play football, and he plays football, and they begin to tutor and try to help him. And for the first time in his life, by the end of his junior year, he's finally making pretty decent grades. He was easily one of the top 5 high school football players in the nation, and it looked like he would definitely go very high in recruiting, and he could definitely play NCAA Division I sports. But he faced a challenge because they had a lot of GPA requirements and ACT requirements, things like that, ACT minimums and things, and there was no way he was ever going to make the grade. Ever going to make the grade and be able to go play college football. All he ever made were D's and F's. And his family began to look into it, and they discovered that you could, through Brigham Young University, you could replace high school D's and F's with A's if you could complete the course. They had 10-day courses. You complete those courses, and then you can replace your bad grades in high school. It's the way it could work in Tennessee anyway. So they were able to do that. And Brigham Young University was the one that kind of helped them do that. And so he eventually got to where he could get his GPA up to where it needed to be so he could go on and play college football. And in fact, he did that. But it was in one of those analysis papers and one of those fast courses, 10-day courses, that Michael Oher was taking, that something awakened in him, maybe even for the first time. Of course, his life had been hard, but this particular analysis paper the assignment was to analyze the poem by Lord Alfred Tennyson called "The Charge of the Light Brigade," and it turned Michael Oher's future around. Before that time, he was just lackadaisical about life, football, about academics. His adversity had just overwhelmed him, and why bother? Why even try? And so, this particular class, though, this Charge of the Light Brigade actually awakened something in him, and his tutor said for the first time in his educational career, he leaned forward in his chair. when he began to hear this thing read. Big lineman, underachieving. He leaned forward, and he couldn't believe what he was hearing in the story as it was unfolding. In fact, he was so intrigued by it, he turned off the NBA Finals and really zoned in on what this poem was about. And when we read the Lord Alfred Tennyson poem, The Charge of the Light Brigade, what we learn, it's about a British brigade on horseback that got some bad intel, and they charged right into the battery of Russian cannons. And here's the deal. They never stopped. They kept riding, a light brigade, thinking that the intel had revealed to them it's just another light brigade, and you can deal with them. But it wasn't. They were way, way outmatched and outgunned. And they kept going. And many of them did not return from that battle. Well, the world found out about this. And when you overcome adversity, and in some cases you walk into the teeth of adversity with strength and resolve and courage, the world stands up and takes notice. And some people even write poetry about it. And that's what Tennyson did. When you read the poem, perhaps you've heard it, it's kind of like a cadence to battle. And I shared this with my small group. In fact, I started quoting it after one of the games they had played this year. I started quoting this poem. Levi looked at me and said, "Dad, that's enough. That's enough. Just let's let the poem go." So you have to forgive me, okay? But I'm inspired by this because I see a little guy by the name of Paul who rides into the cannons of a Roman Empire basically alone. But he has some prayer warriors behind him. He rides in the teeth of that thing. And I'll be daggone if he didn't conquer Rome with the gospel. Because he knew it was his commitment to joy and a positive attitude, and I'm going to see Jesus in everything that happens in my life. I'm going to let him be lifted up and glorified. If I'm in prison, but I'm not stopping. I'm onward and forward. The charge of a New Testament light brigade. He led the point of that thing. Well, when you read this thing, it inspired a generation in 1854, and maybe it'll inspire a generation in 2014 right here in Ligonier. And maybe it'll motivate, just like it motivated an apathetic high school football player who was huge and had talent, but who was going to waste. Maybe as it inspired him, maybe it'll inspire you to give all you have. Half a league, half a league, half a league onward. All in the valley of death rode the 600. Tennyson writes. Forward, the light brigade. Charge for the guns, he said. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Forward, the light brigade. Was there a man dismayed? Not though the soldier knew someone had blundered. They knew their intel guys had messed up, and there they were, stuck in the thick of that, with cannons unloading on their light artillery and their horseback mounts. But they never stopped. Someone had blundered, yes. There's not to make reply. There's not to reason why. There's but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon in front of them, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell. Boldly they rode and well into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell rode the 600. And Michael Orr is leaning forward in his chair. I never knew education could be like this. Flashed all their sabers bare, flashed as they turned in air, sabering the gunners there. Some of them made it to stop the cannon, the guys running the cannons. Charging an army while all the world wondered, plunged in the battery's smoke, right through the line they broke. Cossack and Russian reeled from the saber stroke, shattered and sundered. Then they rode back, but not the 600. Cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon behind them, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell, while horse and hero fell. They that had fought so well came through the jaws of death, back from the mouth of hell. All that was left of them, left of the 600. And when can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made. All the world wondered, honor the charge they made. says Tennyson. Honor the Light Brigade. Noble 600. Well, Orr goes on to pass his BYU classes. He went on to Ole Miss. He got drafted by the Ravens. He won a Super Bowl ring. 2013, he was traded to the Tennessee Titans, where he currently is the right tackle. But it's a story like this encountered on his educational journey that inspired him, and it inspired him to have a different perspective on life. And that's what I want to do with you today. To give you a different way of thinking about things. And I tell you what, guys, I know some of you are up against it. I know you are. But when you are courageous in adversity, and you even though it's a struggle, you struggle to keep a right perspective, you struggle to keep your joy what it should be, you struggle to lift up Jesus in every negative circumstance in life. You do that enough in life, and eventually somebody will sit down and write a poem about you, because it's very rare. It's very rare. And like I said, there was a guy who marched in the jaws of death, and he could do so with joy. The jaws of a Roman Empire, and he could do so with joy because he had a perspective that only God could give him. I think it was the same day I told this another story to these guys. You know, I've got them there around my table. Okay? I got them around my table, and I said, boys, I want to tell you a story. Of course, I've used this story as well. I'm going to close with this, okay? I want to tell you a story. I said, you remember back in the winter when we had a pretty good basketball team at our high school this past year, and it was awesome. And this was right prior to a matchup with Fairfield. Okay, that was that Fairfield game. And I said, you remember back in the winter, we had a good team, and our basketball team was taking care of Fairfield's basketball team. Right? You remember that? Yeah, we remember. I said, yeah, and we had a pretty good team. We did well. Yeah, we did well. And I said, somewhere about the third quarter of that game, as I recall, there was a contingency of fans from the school, right? And from Fairfield, they come down, and that's awesome. And there's, by the way, Fairfield's a good school, a lot of good people there. But the fans had come down, and they were cheering, and in about third quarter in that game, third quarter of that basketball game, West Noble taking care of them, right? Third quarter, the student section starts a cheer. Let's play football. Let's play football. Right? They had kicked our hind end by about 30 or 40 points the previous year. The previous season. Right? 30 or 40 points. The fans cheer, let's play football. I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, ooh, that's not good. That's not good. I'm telling that story to my boys, and I think I maybe see a leg jittering like that. Okay, you're coming in our house, and you're going to start cheering, let's play football. As if that's going to help assuage the fact that you're getting your hind end kicked right now. Right? See that leg just jittering a little bit. Okay. Well, I tell that Light Brigade story and turn them loose. Turn them loose. Into the jaws of death we rode, right? Let's do this. There's a time when, despite adversity, despite what's happened in our lives in the past, despite the defeats and the royal kickings that we've had to endure, there's a time to stand up, make a stand, and grab hold of something deep down inside that can propel us to victory despite what we face. What about you this morning? What adversity are you facing in your life? What courage, what strength, what perspective can you draw from to see you through it? Okay? Well, you think about that. Let me pray for you. as we close this up, all right? Thank you, God, for this day. Thank you for your strength and your joy and your hope. And I just ask and pray that you would be with us this morning. And I know that life plays out on a number of stages. It's not just the sports world, but it is every area of life. There's those moments in time where we just have to grab hold of a new perspective and move forward. And I ask and pray that you would help us here today to do that. You would help us to have courage and strength. And I know that there's a lot of negative things that people have to deal with. We all do. And it's not just here, it's all over the world. And I just pray here this morning for our group that all of us, in seeing how Paul handled his situation, that we would derive strength and hope from it. And even though we don't understand, even though somebody's got some bad intel along the way and maybe didn't guide us right, here we are. The battle rages. And now it's a decision that we have to make. And so I pray that you would give us the strength today to make the right decision. The ones who are facing especially a difficult time of adversity, be with them today. Give them strength. Give them hope. Give them joy. I ask and pray that the what ifs and the if this then this mindset would subside, and that there would be a steady determination to find in Jesus a new life purpose, a new reason for living every day. So we ask for this in Jesus' name. We pray. Amen. Thank you. Will you stand with me this morning? I release you to the battle. And the battle is not to the swift or the strong. You can make it through Christ's help and strength. Go in His peace, go in His joy, and get a new perspective. Maybe it'll start today. Come back next week. We'll talk about a couple more of these, okay? Blessings. Have a great day.